Okay, we're picking up in our series on U.S. imperialism. Today we're talking about the Spanish-American War. All right, this is the first time the United States is going to really put itself on the map, really come out as a strong imperialist nation. This war is going to take place in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, and it's also going to take place in the Philippines. If you're not sure where those are, we're going to look at some maps here later in this PowerPoint, give you an idea of where we're talking geographically. With the Spanish-American War, 1898, like I said, first it's going to take place in Cuba. Cuba is, here we see in the map here, Cuba is just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. It's great for growing sort of fruits and other types of things that we can't produce domestically in the United States. That tropical climate is really good for sugar cane. That's a really hot commodity. All sorts of fruits, farmland. Cuba has always been a long interest for the United States. We've been really wanting to get involved in Cuba for quite some time. One of the first sort of involvement with Cuba is something called the Ostend Manifesto in 1854. This is a secret document where the U.S. is basically stating its interest in Cuba. We're basically portraying it as it's so close to us because it's only 90 miles away. It only makes sense that we would want to bring Cuba into the fold. There's a lot of economic interest there. It just makes sense that somewhere down the road, we will eventually get involved in Cuba and look to perhaps annex it, make it a territory, and possibly even somewhere down the road, make it a state. But Cuba is currently under part of the Spanish Empire. Spain, if you remember Columbus, 1492, the whole 9 yards, they've been a dominant force in North America, Central America, South America, ever since the time of Columbus. Spain's reign is about to end, though, in 1898. The Spanish Empire, after trying to extend and imperialize for so many years, they basically ran out of money. They can't keep control over their foreign lands. It costs a lot of money to keep your naval fleets stationed overseas and to oversee your territories and make sure that everything is in order. So Spain is basically broke, and the United States, we're on the up and coming here, and we're going to look to sort of push Spain out of our little sphere of influence here in Latin America. Causes of the Spanish-American War. Okay, this is easy. They rhyme. Spain, Maine, sugarcane, and the loan letter, which doesn't rhyme at all. All right, Spain, that's the previous empire. We're looking to kick them out. We don't like the fact that they're in our sphere of influence. The USS Maine. This is a naval ship that is stationed off the coast of Cuba, and mysteriously there's an explosion, the hull explodes, and the United States is pointing the finger at Spain. Clearly they're upset that the United States has their naval ship stationed off the coast of Cuba, and they must have been the ones that have attacked us. In reality, it was just an accident. In the boiler room, there was an explosion. Had nothing to do with Spain attacking us at all. And once the newspapers get a hold of this, they run with this story that, of course, Spain must have attacked us. And it creates this panic in the United States. It gets the government all fired up. It gets the United States citizens all fired up. And it really pushes our government and our people to say, yes, we should probably go to war with Spain. We should defend what happened to the USS Maine. Sugarcane is just a reference to the resources that we are interested in over in Cuba. So think of sugarcane as one commodity, think of fruit, think of farming, all the other resources that we would naturally be interested in when it comes to imperialism. Then the Delome letter. This guy Delome, he was the Spanish minister to the United States, and he writes this really critical letter about President McKinley. And once the newspapers get a hold of this letter in which the prime minister is criticizing McKinley, that creates a whole other uproar, and then it's on like Donkey Kong, as you can see in the corner. This, again, just adds to the rhetoric, the tension between Spain and the United States. McKinley can't look like he's a weak president, and he can't let Spain basically call us out. So this is sort of like the final straw. We have all the economic interest to take over Cuba. We've got the alleged attack of the USS Maine, and now we've got Spanish ministers basically calling us out, and we can't have that. So these are the reasons. So think Spain, Maine, sugarcane, and then just the loan letter. Remember it. Okay, so like we said, the Spanish-American War, it's fought both in Cuba and in the Philippines. So let's dip out. Here's a map just showing you quick. Like, here's the Philippines. Here's Manila Bay, which is in this part here in the Philippines. But let's kind of zoom out quick. Let's take a look at the map just to give us a global perspective of where we're at here. Let's zoom out. Here we have North America, South America. Here is the Pacific Ocean. Zoom in here as we work our way across. There's Hawaii. We just learned about Hawaii the other day. And the Midway Islands are somewhere in here. Let's zoom out. If we keep working our way across the Pacific Ocean, there's Japan. Matthew Perry opens that up in 1853 and 1854. There's China. There's Korea. And let's zoom in here. There's the Philippines. This chunk of islands right through here. That is the Philippines. So that's where we are in the world. And let's zoom in. In Manila Bay, in the Spanish-American War, this is in May of 1898. This is the first U.S. naval victory. The difference between the U.S. Navy and the Spanish Navy: U.S. Navy modernized. We have modern warships, battleships with steel hulls, the latest military technology on them, fast steam-powered ships. Spain still has a fleet of like wooden ships, right? The sails, the wood, the whole nine yards. They've got some steel-hulled ships, but not as many as the United States. Again, Spain spent a lot of their money and resources over the last couple hundred years trying to maintain that military, and they just didn't have the funds to upgrade their navy. So when it comes to these naval battles, the United States is like dominating. All right, wooden ship, steel ship. Do the math, figure it out. Who's going to win? 0 dead. Good numbers for the U.S. Spain pretty much reduced to this hit and run sort of tactic, pretty much useless against these huge, giant American naval fleets. As we're working our way across the Pacific Ocean, we're also going to take up the islands of Guam and Wake Island. They're pretty small. They're really tiny, but in the grand scheme of things, these tiny islands are great for coaling stations, right? If we're going to expand our Navy, we have to get our naval ships out into the Pacific and refuel them. So basically, these are like the mid-Pacific gas stations. Think of them that way, but instead of gas, it's coal. These would prove to be valuable later in World War II when we're using them for air bases and naval bases against Japan. Again, just to kind of give us an idea where we are in the world, Hawaii would be off the screen here. We can't see it, but eventually here's Wake, the island I just showed you, tiny little island. Here's Guam, tiny little island. And then if we keep going, here's the Philippines again. So if we need to get to the Philippines, if we're going to fight this war, we can go from Hawaii to the Midway Islands, to Wake Island, to Guam, to the Philippines. It helps expand our empire. And let's go back over into Cuba. We're going to talk about the Battle of San Juan Hill. Hey, Teddy Roosevelt. All right. Teddy Roosevelt is the leader of a volunteer group of soldiers known as the Rough Riders. These are guys, this is the first sort of modern cavalry unit. Guys on horses, experienced outdoorsmen, hunters, former soldiers. These guys are volunteering to be this rough and rugged unit that's going to be fighting on the ground in Cuba. So this kind of really helps out Teddy Roosevelt's career. He's going to start out with the Rough Riders. He's going to become governor of New York, then vice president, and then he's going to move on to finally become president. But he's got his start here with the Rough Riders. Pointing out in the picture here, there are no black soldiers in this photograph. There were tons of black soldiers fighting in the war. However, because it's in the 1890s and of course racism is still running rampant, we're going to exclude the blacks from the photograph at the victory of San Juan Hill. Here's again just a photograph, some of the modern military technology that the U.S. had. This is a Gatling gun. You just turn this crank and it spins these barrels, and it's like a precursor to the modern day machine gun. And we also had rifle technology, way more accurate than what the Spanish were using in the Philippines and what they were using in Cuba. This gave us a huge advantage in fighting. So what's the outcome? So what? What happens? Big deal. We beat Spain pretty handily in both Cuba and in Philippines. Not that many died. This is pretty low numbers, but check this number out here, 379. That's it, just 379 deaths from battle, from direct conflict. So where are the other deaths coming from? Over 5,000 deaths not from battle, so what's happening? What's going on here? The problem is people are dying from disease. I mean, they're fighting these wars in tropical climates. Mosquitoes carry disease, and the majority of deaths, disease carried by mosquitoes. The other deaths, a large portion of deaths, are coming from eating bad food. Remember, we read the book The Jungle, excerpts from The Jungle. That came out in 1906, so unfortunately the meat regulations hadn't quite happened yet, so all that rotten, spoiled meat was still an issue for many of our soldiers. So they would eat the meat, get sick, die, total bummer. So that's kind of like just an interesting fun fact, I guess. This also establishes the United States as a world power. This puts us on the map. It proves to the rest of the industrialized Europe that, hey, the United States is a contender. We now have established bases and coaling stations throughout all of the Pacific. We are a force to contend with. So Germany, Great Britain, France, all you former major imperialist countries, be aware of the United States. We're doing big things. This essentially gains the United States our empire throughout the Pacific. We're now like the top dog. And it also helps secure economic interests in the Pacific. So all those other island nations and into Asia, this is going to secure that the United States has a foothold or can take the lead when it comes to Asian trade. And with every good war, you have to have a treaty to end it. Spanish-American War is no different. We have the Treaty of Paris. This war is really short. It doesn't even go like a full year. It's like, that's how lopsided this victory is. We just crushed Spain. And to the victor go the spoils. So what are we going to take from Spain? One, Spain is going to give U.S. Puerto Rico in the Caribbean and Guam in the Pacific. Thank you very much, Spain. We'll take those. Let's zoom out. Let's go to the map quick again. Let's figure out where these places are. Oops. Let's go to the Caribbean. Let's zoom in. Here we go. Florida. There's Cuba, 90 miles off the coast. That's where we fought the war. And then Puerto Rico is over here. We're going to take that from you. Thank you very much, Spain, Puerto Rico. And we said Guam was the other territory. Boom. Tiny little Guam. Thank you, Spain. Moving out. Guam. Right where that arrow is. So again, tiny, insignificant, but for coaling station, great. We'll take it. Thank you very much, Spain. And okay, so, we also get the Philippines to the United States. We fought the war there, Philippines and Cuba. $20 million, that's a steal. We'll take it. That'll help secure our economic interests. Quick little hop, skip, and a jump, and that'll put us back into Asia. So here we are again. Here's the Philippines. $20 million. Thank you very much, Spain. And from here, we can easily secure any economic interests that we have in China. Let's say we've got trade routes and everything else set up. What if something goes wrong? Well, we've got naval bases in the Philippines. We can easily put down any rebellions or make sure that the United States' economic interests are protected. So this is a vital resource. This is a vital station, vital position for the U.S. to have in the Pacific. Everything is working out well. Treaty of Paris, excuse me. Ooh. Okay, and Cuba is going to become a protectorate, meaning it's kind of like independent, but the United States is kind of like, sort of like its big brother. Like, it's going to overwatch it and make sure like it's protected economically. If some foreign country threatens Cuba, the U.S. will step in if need be. If anyone tries to do some trade deals that aren't beneficial for both Cuba and the U.S. can step in and sort of regulate those trades. So think of protectorate as like the big brother protecting the younger brother sort of scenario. That's exactly what's going on. And this doesn't really set well with Cuba. I mean, they don't want to be like hovered over or like told what to do by the U.S., but that's essentially what happens in Part 4 of the Treaty of Paris, which creates what's called the Platt Amendment. All right, this is the part where the U.S. really takes advantage of Cuba. Let's take a closer look at the Platt Amendment. The Platt Amendment 1, Cuba is going to sell or lease a piece of land to the United States for use of a naval base or coaling station. We still have this naval base today. It's Guantanamo Bay. Cuba is not going to allow any other country to acquire Cuban territory other than the United States. So if you want to buy real estate, you want any property, territory, no go. It's only for the United States. And Cuba is going to allow the U.S. to intervene in the country whenever it was necessary to protect American citizens living in Cuba. This is the big one. This is the one that really ticks off Cuba and leads to strained relations from the 1898 all the way up through like the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and we'll get into that stuff later. But this is not going to sit well with the Cuban government, Cuban people. Basically, the United States is taking over the role of Spain. Spain was the prior imperialist nation. Basically, we promised Cuba we'd give them their freedom, their independence. But ultimately what we do is just sort of like take the place of Spain. Sorry, you're not being independent. We are now sort of the imperialist nation watching over you, Cuba. All right, that is the Spanish-American War. Fought in Cuba, fought in the Philippines, fought over on land, fought at sea. We basically dominate Spain. We are now one of the world's superpowers and on our way to becoming the #1 superpower. The Spanish-American War sets the tone for U.S. imperialism for the next several decades.